Let's get back to Parliament, where my colleague Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is standing by. Hello, Joseph.
Hello, Aisha.
Hello. Earlier, the line dropped, and you were making the point that members of Parliament want the Minister for Housing to present a clear plan on how to deal with Accra's flooding.
Exactly. For the minority side, they think that the country project we started in 2013 was a good blueprint as far as dealing with the flood situation is concerned. But if this administration has decided to abandon that particular project, they need to go ahead and provide a new blueprint on how to deal with the problem. And additionally, they are asking that funding should be increased to the Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing. They point to the fact that when you look at the money that was given to them for flooding initiatives this year in the budget, it's only in the region of 50 million cedis, which they say is very much insufficient. So beyond just presenting a new blueprint, there should be the injection of more capital into operations at the Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing, so they can help avoid a repeat of such situation going on.
Do we know when the minister is coming to the House with that?
The minister actually appeared before the House 3 months ago. That was when he explained that they were doing dredging, they were undertaking a number of initiatives, they were clearing spills out of some of the drains in Accra, and so he's already done that implemented approach when it comes to dealing with the problem. So that's why they are asking, not exactly for the minister to appear before Parliament to present such a blueprint, but they want to come out with something like that.
Gakpo, we're hearing of a supposed resignation by Emmanuel Bejira. Tell us more about this. So
Emmanuel Bejira is the chairman of the Parliamentary Christian Committee. He's chairman of the Voter Ranging Caucus in Parliament. He is ranking member on Parliament Committee when it comes to government assurances. Well, we gather that he has concerns about how the national executives of the NDC are managing things in its constituency when it comes to various elections, right from the branch level to the constituency level. And he feels there is more like a deliberate effort to frustrate the work that he is doing and virtually to get others to possibly take over the slot. And so we gather that he penned a resignation letter, which is to get to Parliament, so that then he would get off the position as Member of Parliament. But again, we gather that there have been very frantic efforts on the part of leadership here in Parliament at the minority level to get him to rescind that decision. We gathered earlier that there's a meeting that should have come off between himself and other minority leadership members, but it so happened that when all was set for the meeting, himself wasn't around, so they couldn't meet to finalize things. So that effort is ongoing to get him to rescind that decision that he's purportedly taking to resign from the position. But I've been speaking to some members of Parliament, specifically Samuel George, who is the MP for Ningo Pram, and him being on the Communications Committee of Parliament. He remains one of those who speak for the minority generally. And he says from the briefing that they've gotten officially from their leadership, their membership is intact. There are 116 of them. As far as they are concerned, officially, such incidents when it comes to a resignation hasn't come to attention yet. So he is virtually calling for calm and indicating that no member on the minority side will be leaving Parliament.
All right, many thanks to you, Joseph Opoku-Gakpo. We'll be getting more from Parliament in our subsequent bulletin, and of course, tell you whether the resignation came on or not. Now, 69% of Ghanaians think government is failing in the fight against corruption. This is according to a research conducted by anti-corruption agency Pen Plus Bytes, who have developed a new way of fighting the canker. According to the research findings, majority of the people sampled for the project hold a perception that government's attitude in delivering on its promises to curb corruption is rather lukewarm. Let's get more from that research finding. And joining me me in the studio is Executive Director of Pen Plus Bytes, Kwame Ahiabenu, to further probe this research. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Very good to see you here.
Also good to be here. And
it's so refreshing. So 69% of people perceive government to be lukewarm, or government's attitude to be lukewarm towards dealing with corruption, and they think government is failing. I mean, what explanation, how did they explain this feeling?
Basically, the fight against corruption is not a one-time activity, but a long-drawn process. One of the elements that we have realized is that you need to involve citizens in the fight against corruption. So we selected to use the manifesto of the current government. They made a lot of promises in terms of how they're going to deal with corruption and how to ensure that we can reduce the incidence of corruption in Ghana.
Right.
So based on that, we did a survey and also did a focus group discussion in 4 regions, which is Ashanti region, the Volta region, Greater Accra, and Western region.
Okay.
And when we posed certain questions to them, it came to light that 69% of our respondents believe strongly that the government could do better in terms of fighting corruption.
Okay. So let's look at, you said you did your research in 4 regions.
Yeah.
So what methodology did you use? Let's look at your methodology. Let's look at your sample size.
Okay. So first, our subject area is corruption and the fight against corruption. To do that, we selected 4 regions: Ashanti region, Volta region, Greater Accra, and Western region. We used 2 tools of data collection. The first tool is focus group discussion, where we invited religious leaders, political parties, both ruling and opposition. We invited the media. We invited assembly members. We invited people who are notable in the society. Based on that, we went through a series of questions which are premised on how is the government attempting to ensure that their promises are being achieved. And based on the results of that, we also conducted a survey. So we sent questionnaires to a number of people in the society. Again, based on those parameters, they have to count for religious leaders, traditional leaders, political parties. So the 2 tools that we use in the data collection are questionnaires and focus group discussion. Okay.
Okay, so focus group discussion. So if 69% of the people did not believe that government was fighting corruption, then it means that 21% of the people actually believe in government.
Yes, so it means that actually the government is not resting. They are doing something.
Okay, but so with these people who believed in government, what were their reasons?
One of the biggest one was that the appointment of Martin Ahiabenu was regarded as one of the key promises that the government made, and they have fulfilled it. And so that came out quite strongly. Yeah, the Freedom of Information law also, which attempts have been made to pass, also came out strongly in the view of the people who believe that something's been done against the fights of corruption.
Against corruption. Yeah. So, but why did you decide to choose only 4 regions?
One, if you do a research, we have 10 regions. You have to be representative. You agree with me that Ashanti region, Volta region presents those strongholds for both political parties.
Right.
Greater Accra is a melting point. Western region also presents interesting demographics. So those are the regions that we selected. We are hoping that this is the first phase of the research. In the second phase, we are able to cover the whole country. The whole idea is that when you're sampling, you have to be purposeful in sampling, in the sense that you're focusing on selecting people who are within a certain bracket of people. So if you have a group of people who are political parties, then you have some people represented. Religion is important in Ghana, traditional leaders, the media, and so on and so forth. So you have those group of people, and once they speak, they can give you the pulse of the nation.
So once 69% of the people think that government is failing, it means that they have some expectations which they think government has not met. What are these expectations that they think government has not met? Are they specific things they were expecting from government and they didn't see from the government?
One of them for a lot of people at the grassroots level is the school feeding program. Yeah, it has become partisan, for want of a better description, whether the selection of the caterers are premised on political affiliation. So they are looking for a law that ensures that when selections are being done at that level, political clearing does not come into play.
Okay.
There are also issues about monitoring. Sometimes you have school children carrying firewood to the school to be used in cooking for them. According to how the program is designed, they are not supposed to do so.
Okay.
So these are some of the practical things that they mentioned. Again, we're all happy that Martin Amidu was appointed. However, one issue that came up, does he have the resources? And we have other state institutions who are mandated to fight corruption. Well, what have they done so far? Okay. So those are some of the practical issues that came to play. Yeah.
So going forward, did they tell you how they want government to deal with the issue?
The first thing they said was that promises, again, that's why I said that if you make a promise, they hope that you can achieve the promise. Okay. So they're hoping that the ruling government, the MPP, made a lot of promises. Okay. They are hoping that those promises will be worked upon so that they can see the light of day. That's number one. Number two is that they believe that the fight against corruption cannot be only words. It should be backed by action. Okay. A lot of time there's a talk about bring evidence and all that, but they believe that some of these issues, when you have check and balances, and people know that, look, even if I'm in the political party per se, I do something, something can be done against me, then they will ensure that they put up good behavior. Okay. And it was quite clear that a lot of the respondents believe that if you want to fight corruption, people are not going on their own just have a good behavior. Okay. They will always want to take the resources that don't belong to them. So we need to put in place check and balances so that corruption becomes a very expensive activity for the people that engage in them. Yeah.
But before I even jump onto the conclusions of your research and the recommendations you've made after this whole survey, what actually motivated this kind of research? Of course, you've told us that you chose the 4 regions based on a certain criteria, but what pushed this kind of research?
Pen Plus Buy have been working in this area for some time, which refers to getting citizens to participate. Yeah, you just mentioned Honorable Bejra. We work with him in Parliament on the Assurance Committee. Okay. So our work is always around how do we ensure citizens can participate. Okay. Now, after the elections, we realized that a lot of Ghanaians can actually tell you what the government promised. Okay. So that became something concrete that we can use as a basis of undertaking the research. Because they know about the promises. So this time, to get the citizens to participate in the process, which is beyond just the fight against corruption done by few CSOs or NGOs, we want to get greater participation. And to do that, you need to get them something they can relate to. And that's the manifesto promises. Okay. So based on that, we are now able to develop a questionnaire and also question guide to actually pinpoint areas that they can relate to. They can actually monitor in a practical way how the government is performing. Okay. So our entry into this study was informed by how do we allow citizens to participate in a manner that they can relate. So that, remember, this survey was done in the local dialect. So when you go and talk to them in the local dialect, they can relate to some of this issue because they participated in the election, and this is an add-on to the election work. Okay.
So in all of the researches you've conducted, you say you've been working on these this corruption issue over the years. In all of this, how would you rate the country's fight against corruption? Would you say that we are improving or we are retrogressing?
As I mentioned at the beginning, fighting corruption is just not a one-time activity, it's a process. Okay. And it means that you cannot mark yourself that have done well. Okay. So from our side of the coin, we still need to fight a bit more or harder.
But looking from where we're coming from, at least you can do some balancing
so
and
for
see
example,
whether...
So for example, the establishment of the office of the special prosecutor is very important. It needs to be resourced. That's a very good institutional framework that we can rank ourselves in terms of performance. Okay. Freedom of information law is going to be very critical.
But the institution hasn't started working yet.
But you see,
I don't know whether we can still say...
You asked the question if we are. So I think based on that, at least if you are marking, you have something to build on. Okay. And I think that's critical. Yeah. But beyond that, overall, a lot of citizens still believe that corruption is in their face every day. Yeah. And when they interact with the public system, they meet corruption at that level, and they hear on the news about the resources meant for development, which are being pocketed by some individuals. So yes, we are making progress, but our progress is quite slow, and we need to get mobilized citizens. We need to get everybody on board to continue the fight. And even if today we are ranked as the top performer in terms of the fight, we cannot rest, because once you rest, you can just drop significantly overnight. And I think that's quite critical.
So there are some who say that corruption is attitudinal, and for us to be able to deal with it rutely, we must first change our attitudes. There are others who say it's due to systemic failure. Our systems are really not working, and that's why people are penetrating in the loopholes. For you, I mean, and from where you are coming from, what are we not doing right?
It's a bit of both. There is a lot of acceptance of some corrupt acts, because if you went to church, the person's giving a lot of money, nobody asks, how do you get your money? We accept some form of corruption, and that has to change. And there is always this attitude that when we get into power, it's our time to what? Chop some of the money, literally. And that has to change. And on top of that, the institutions that are supposed to provide check and balances are also not strong. So it's a bit of both. And we believe that to win this fight, we have to fight at both fronts, both for individuals, institutions, the society as a whole have to change their attitude by rejecting corruption. But you have to understand that corruption landscape is like a marketplace. There are buyers and sellers. There are people who are going to benefit, there are people who are not going to lose. And we have to ensure that the people who are gaining from corruption, we can ensure that that gains, they cannot leverage it or benefit from it. And that's what is lacking. So we need to work on attitude of people, rejecting corruption. And second, we need to strengthen the institutions.
You made a very valid point, and you said that people think that when they come to power, that is when we must also chop small. And it brings back that conversation of when political parties think that, okay, the state must begin to sponsor activities of political parties so that they don't do it individually and now begin to think that it's a business venture where I'm investing my money. So when I get power, I will have to recoup the money I pumped into my campaign and all of that. What do you make of that argument?
Yeah, the issue about political political elections campaign or campaign finance is quite critical, and I think you touch on a very relevant issue. However, state sponsorship of political parties per se may not resolve it. Let's assume that we are able to give each political party $1 million each. Are you okay? To pursue elections. They will tell you there's not enough, so they will still need more money. So what we want to encourage the political parties to do is that they have to mobilize members to contribute. We don't have a lot of citizens supporting political parties. I know that, for example, the MPP attempted to get some small funds from party members using mobile phones, but we don't have a lot of that. So it's only few people who have the resources and they invest. Once they invest, they want a return. And the system also allowed them to recoup illegally their investment. So for me, political or campaign financing can be resolved if we can get citizens to contribute. So if today I contribute 10 cedis to this political party, you also do the same, it will swell up into a big amount of money. Once we do that, we can hold these political parties to account. But if one person can write a check of 10 million Ghana cedi, yes, they will call the shot. Because if they put that money in treasury bill, they tell you that there will be a return. And if you put in a political party, they want some return. And in a country where they can get maybe 20% out of that investment, they will do so. Do you support the creation of some sort of independent, maybe commission or something like that to deal with corruption? For instance, we are tapping ourselves in the back because we've been able to bring in the Special Prosecutor's Office. Yes, of course, that's a plus. But to think that
that person is appointed by the president, then again, the issue of politics and what political people do or politicians do come in play. So therefore, people are saying that why don't we have an independent commission, from all the parties? We don't have, those people will not be affiliated, even if they're affiliated to parties. Of course, you and I go to vote and nobody knows who I vote for, nobody knows who you vote for. We should put in people who will work devoid of partisanship. I'm not saying that the special prosecutor is partisan, but the fact that he was appointed by the president, gives some room for people to question that, okay, he may dance to the tune of the president.
Yeah, this issue came up during our research and it was debated. So when we asked the respondents, what is your suggestion? How do you appoint an independent person? Is that going to be you or me? And we could not come out to a conclusion. Okay. So yes, the idea about having somebody who is independent is great, but practically, how do you do that?
How do you do that?
Yeah. And so that means, yes, it's a good idea, but to translate into action, there are no clear path. So what we suggest is that, look, we still have a number of laws, we still have a number of institutions. One of our bigger challenges is about implementation. And we are not seeing enough implementation. We just had announced producing some videos. What are citizens saying about it? Elsewhere, they say people who have got into the streets and demonstrated and all that. So for us, we need to ensure that the few laws we have, the few institutions we have, they should work. Secondly, citizens should be interested.
Okay.
Yeah, and we all heard about the fact that the 74-year-old man who went around a number of hospitals and could not get a hospital bed and died.
Who died?
It's linked to what? Corruption.
Yeah.
And we need to actually understand that some of these things can impact you and I. And we sometimes wait that, look, it's not our money. Yeah, and some people also suggest that Ghanaians don't pay enough tax. If we're paying more tax, then we know that, look, it's our money that people are using. And we need to get citizens to what? Understand that the resources is yours.
Right.
And if somebody is pocketing it for his individual or family benefit, we need to make sure that we are angry about it. We need to make sure that we mobilize against that. And we are not seeing enough of that. So I will still go back to the fact that, look, the laws we have, the institutions we have, we should make them to work. We should get citizens to be more agitated. We should get citizens to be more concerned. We should get them to be more inclined towards the fight against corruption.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get back to your research. And of course, I know you have some recommendations to dealing with corruption. Of course, if we've all agreed that it's a big canker and our pace has been slow over the years, and it means we need to improve. What are your recommendations in this research we're talking about?
The first one is about resources for the state institutions mandated to fight corruption. They can have more resources so that they can fight the war a bit harder. So that came out quite strongly. The second one was on the fact that we need to strengthen institutions across board so that there's check and balances. One of the issues that came out was our laws. The law which can penalize corruption is not quite clear. And that ambiguity needs to be resolved. So one of the issues we want to advocate is that when you say corruption, what does that mean? We need to, it should be made quite clear. The law should be made more, robust to deal with some of these issues, because if you go and take some resources, you can be accused of not performing your work well, but not actually stealing. So we need to look at that also. One element also that came out is that how do we enable state institutions to work better with civil society artists? They have their institutions in place. When they are doing the fight, it should not be that, okay, state is on one side, civil society on the other side. There should be ongoing collaboration in a more rigorous manner that will ensure that both parties can support each other. And that's quite important in the fight.
And how do you intend to push for these things to happen?
Yeah, tomorrow we are launching this at La Palma at 10 o'clock. We are going to be live on Joy FM. And after the launch, we are going to have a dialogue where we bring all the stakeholders together in a policy briefing type of meeting to discuss some of these issues so that we can actually validate some of our recommendations and set a roadmap that will ensure that at the end of the day, some of the recommendations that we have will just not stay on paper, but it can be translated into action.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Kwame Ahiabenu. We'll be looking forward to the launch tomorrow and see what comes out from the stakeholder engagement. Kwame Ahiabenu is the Executive Director of Pen Plus Bytes, and they conducted the research that says 69% of Ghanaians think that government is failing in dealing with corruption in the country. So researchers also at Transparency International say media exposures on corruption does not negatively influence the performance of nations in the annual Corruption Perception Index. Over the years, government officials have argued that Ghana's poor showing is as a result of media exposures. Now, a research expert involved in the compilation of the CPI, Mr. Pring, says media exposures rather improve the ranking of countries. She spoke with Manasseh Azariawene at the headquarters in Berlin, Germany.
Our Corruption Perceptions Index is an aggregate index based on 13 different external data sources. These are external sources which collect data on the perceived levels of corruption in the public sector around the world, coming from very reputable organizations like the World Bank or the Bertelsmann Foundation.
Okay, so when you collect the information, what does it go through before you rank the countries?
So these are all very reputable external sources of data which run surveys of businessmen or in-depth experts' assessments on the perceived levels of corruption in the public sector. Transparency International takes the data which has been collected by these external sources and takes these specific corruption indicators. What we do is we rescale the data so that our data runs from a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is seen as the most corrupt and 100 is seen as the cleanest. We run our data through a rescaling approach which allows us to measure change over time in the level of corruption in a country.
The politicians often say the country may not be as corrupt as the CPI indicates, but because of media exposure and the noise the media makes. So Ghana, for instance, may be better than actually perceived. How do you explain this? Does the media increase or decrease the level of perception people have about corruption?
Well, this is where we think that the fact that our index is an expert's assessment, it comes into play. These experts have a very in-depth understanding of the level of corruption in a country, and so they're less swayed by a big media scandal, for example. Businessmen as well have direct access to public servants, and so have that in-depth understanding. If anything, what our latest research shows is that, if anything, journalists help reduce the level of corruption. When we did some in-depth analysis of our Corruption Perceptions Index, we found that those countries that tend to score best on our index have the best protections for journalists, and these are countries where journalists can speak openly and freely. We think that journalists play an absolutely vital watchdog function because they're able to expose corruption cases which otherwise would go uncovered, thereby allowing corruption to be reduced by the effective rule of law.
So if a country ranks poorly and it wants to get better ranking, what should the state officials do, the government and the state officials? What should they do?
Well, our principles, what we normally say is that countries shouldn't just focus on improving in our Corruption Perceptions Index, but they should be working hard to reduce the level of corruption broadly. Corruption affects a number of different institutions in a country, and so countries can't expect to improve very quickly.